We're going to move straight to item 6.5 and welcome officers to the room. Good morning, councillors. Through the chair, agenda item 6.5 today relates to a combined development application impact assessment for multiple dwelling, shop, port services, food and drink, and reconfiguring a lot for 1 into 4 lot subdivision plus a volumetric lot, and operational works for prescribed title works at lot 509 East Quay Drive, Bigger Waters. The subject site is a single allotment with an area of 21,860 square metres. It's located within the medium density residential zone and has a street frontage of approximately 500 metres and a canal frontage to the rear. Immediately to the east is Dublin Docks and the Dan Murphys. The immediate context as shown on the screen includes Harbour Town to the south, a mixed use and an industry zones to the southwest, and the under construction Harbour Shores development to the east. The local character comprises of houses and dual occupancies to the north of the site. East and west of the site are medium to high rise buildings ranging between 6 to 12 stories in building height. This slide shows a visual representation of the proposed development. So it's a 4-stage development to deliver 511 dwellings, 47 marina berths and 6 commercial tenancies, all located within stage 1. The multiple dwelling component incorporates 511 dwellings, building height that ranges between 7 and 11 story, has a compliant site cover, good setbacks, and proposes approximately 950 car parks for the residential component. Here's your typical basement floor plan. This plan shows all the car parking, including resident, visitor, and 10 staff car parks within the stage 1 basement. As you can see, between stage 1 and 2, the basements are connected. They share an access to the basement, and this is managed by a building management statement. This is the typical ground floor plan. Shows 6 buildings within a generous landscape setting. There's a publicly accessible boardwalk throughout the development along the canal, and provides access points to the park to the northwest. Just looking at stage 1 ground plan where the actual food and drink tenancies are. So there's 6 commercial tenancies ranging between 150 and 270 square metres, accessed off a central promenade. They're interchangeable between food and drink and shop, and there's car parking proposed immediately adjacent to this area. This is the typical apartment layout floor plan. Stage 2 and 3 offer a 2-story apartment where the proposed over ground level and level 1. Throughout the development, there's a mix of 2 to 4 bedroom apartments. The application was publicly notified in May earlier this year. There were 239 properly made objections were received, with the key matters raised listed here on the screen. So the key considerations through the public notification included the car parking, impacts on the road network and the building height. Just to touch on those a bit further, so the key consideration in relation to car parking, it's noted that the development complies with the acceptable outcome for resident visitor and commercial car parking. In fact, it proposes a 90 surplus of resident car parking, and this has been included, every multi-purpose room has been included within this calculation. The development has minimised the loss of on-street car parking by limiting the number of crossovers to 7 across a 500 metre frontage. It is worth noting that City Plan does not have an assessment benchmark to minimise or the loss of on-street car parking. It's to ensure that there's a safe pedestrian and vehicle environment is maintained. So as a result, we've got a net loss of 31 car parks and we're retaining 21 on-street car parks. In relation to the road network, the applicant submitted a traffic impact assessment. The TIA undertook assessments of local and state controlled intersections. The assessment determined that there was sufficient capacity within the road network with an additional average of one additional car in the peak hours. Importantly, the assessment of the state-controlled roads incorporated the traffic generated by the under construction Harbour Shores development to the east. In relation to building height, you can see on the slide here that the building height actually tapers down to a code accessible building height to the north. That stages 1, 2 and 3 are comparable to the East Quay development and the Lovato building to the west, and stage 4 is compliant with building height. The proposal provides for a landscape street edge, a mix of high quality materials, good setbacks to the street, good building separation, compliant site cover, and a mix of housing options within close proximity to amenities in Harbour Town. Therefore, officers have recommended approval subject to conditions of the proposed development. Questions?
Councillor Gates.
Thank you. I understand that there's a lot of concern about the loss of on-street car parks. I just wondered, through you, Chairman, whether there's an opportunity to delete any of the crossovers, given that there are 7, and whether internal access might be possible, and whether the car parking requirements could still be met if some of those crossovers were deleted.
Through the Chair to Councillor Gates, I'll just call Chris Levers up from Transport Assessment to respond to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Opportunities to minimise the crossovers, I think was the question. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Look, I think relevantly, the site, I think as mentioned, has a 500-metre frontage, so 7 crossovers across that frontage. It is quite an unusually large site. Averages out to be 1 crossover every 70 metres, which I don't think is unreasonable for this size of site and scale of development. There are some advantages to more crossovers as opposed to less, because it distributes the traffic on the road network better than concentrating it in a lesser number of vehicle access points. There is also some complexity with the development in terms of the included ROL, so the four lot subdivision and staging. So I might let Brandon answer that, just because I think that will add to the answer.
Thanks, Chris. So to ensure the efficiency, the delivery of the development and construction of it, the applicant has staged the development, and in accordance with the frontage, there is more than 20 metres per stage, which allows to have an acceptable outcome of 2 VXOs per stage. So they've actually limited it even more by consolidating stages 1 and 2, as you could see on the basement plan, to a roundabout, and consolidated to 1 access point on that frontage. So they've actually minimised the loss along that frontage even further.
Councillor Gates, would you mind if I ask a question of Chris while he's up?
Sure.
Chris, so we lose 7 on-street car parks because of the pedestrian crossing. Is there a different treatment available that might reduce the amount of car parks lost? Like if this was a wombat crossing or a different setup that doesn't require as many loss, or is that in that location, is that the minimal amount of car parks we can lose because of the pedestrian crossing?
Yeah, look, the requirements for banning parking on either side of a crossing would be the same, if not more, depending on the treatment. So I think that really is the minimum that you can lose. And I do think that is relevant. So of the 31 spaces that are being lost, 7 are lost due to that pedestrian crossing you can see proposed on the screen. And that crossing will provide public benefit by providing a safe crossing to Harbour Town for not just this development, but for the surrounding residential community. And it will also provide safe access to the publicly accessible boardwalk that's proposed for this development. In addition, there's 9 spaces lost due to the proposed access roundabout, which is just off the screen there. And again, the roundabout, it's been aligned with an existing Harbour Town access, so that will provide public benefit by improving access to Harbour Town for the existing community that the locals would predominantly use that access to shopping centre. It also provides traffic calming benefit on the road as well. So when you remove those 2 aspects, the number of spaces lost due to vehicle crossings is 15. So in that regard, we've assessed it against the Australian standard, which does provide minimum standards for sightlines at vehicle crossings. And the constraint with this particular site is it's located on the inside of a curve, which does complicate sightlines. So in order to try and minimise the loss, council officers, Brandon, Lara, and myself walked the entire frontage with the applicant, their traffic consultant, and we also got members of the transport team at Infrastructure Gold Coast to attend. We've walked the entire frontage with a view to trying to minimise that loss, and we did actually save some spaces through that process, and we've narrowed it down to 15.
So one final question about that. Was consideration given to a flyover rather than an at-grade pedestrian crossing? And did officers consider conditioning that?
No, there was no consideration to that.
Yep. Yeah, while we've got Chris up, let's keep to the traffic and parking ones.
Thank you. So through Chair, just the roundabout that's on the screen that you've just spoken about, was there any consideration to that becoming a signalised intersection and therefore incorporating the pedestrian crossing?
No, there was not.
For any reason?
No particular reason. The applicant didn't propose signals, and operationally it doesn't require signals. And signals themselves become a maintenance burden to council moving forward. So we don't really go for signals unless they're really required.
I only asked the question, Chair, because the conversation so far has been around the loss of the on-street parking as a result of a number of things, but sightlines and the pedestrian crossing. And I'm slightly surprised that it wasn't considered, because I was looking at the picture on the screen. The pedestrian crossing would therefore be moved to the signalised lights, which would have freed up some. So considering, so that was why I'm asking that question. You're saying it wasn't considered. Okay, thanks.
So Chris, in the same, it's like, what if that was a signalised pedestrian crossing instead? Would it still require the same sight lines on the Australian standards?
It wouldn't require the same sight lines because it's controlled by traffic signals. In terms of what resultant loss there would be, look, I haven't done that exercise. It would probably be less. But again, traffic signals, we really only ask for those where they're really required. And again, I think there's no city plan benchmark that requires you to retain or minimise loss of on-street parking. So I think that was not something that was really considered as part of the assessment and against the assessment of city plan.
Do we have more questions for Chris? Councillor Curtis?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Page 412, the traffic impact assessment was prepared by Bitsios Consulting, and it concluded that the proposed development will not have any detrimental impact on the local road network. That's an assertion that's vigorously challenged by the surrounding community members. There's also concern that it was constructed utilising 2019 data. I'm just wondering if the assertions and claims made within that document have been cross-checked by the city for accuracy.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it was scrutinised by both Council and Department of Transport and Main Roads, noting that the majority of the intersections that form part of the assessment are state controlled, so that being all the intersections on Oxley Drive and Brisbane Road. Bitsios Consulting are a reputable transport consultant on the Gold Coast. They included their own traffic counts at all of the relevant intersections in the assessment as part of their traffic impact assessment. And as Brandon previously noted, the assessment also included all of the proposed development traffic from Harbour Shores on the eastern side of Oxley Drive and the proposed changes to the Oxley Drive road network as part of that DA.
Chris, would you just mind? So there was a specific part of that question around 2019 data, and I think you kind of said that they did new studies. So can you just clarify that it was based on today's information?
Correct. So they did their own as part of their assessment. I think they did their counts. It was either late 2022 or early 2023. So anything that's less than 2 years old, we generally accept as being current.
Thank you. So next page over 413, the PO16 requires the development to ensure that the function and capacity of the road network is maintained and does not compromise on the safety. In practical terms, how is that assessed and using who and what data?
Through you, Mr. Chair, applicants typically lodge a traffic impact assessment report to address PO16 of the Transport Code. Traffic impact assessments generally follow a standard format, which is, industry practice. Intersections are the constraints generally on the road network, and so a TIA will focus on the impacts of any intersections within the influence of the development and where it would be expected that there might be an impact. The applicant has undertaken, peak period traffic counts at a number of Oxley Drive, Brisbane Road, and 2 council-controlled intersections, as well as their proposed roundabout, based on establishing current conditions on the road network. The TIA would then calculate the development traffic generation potential, and then that's assigned on the road network through those intersections. They then do traffic modelling at all of those intersections at year of opening, and in the case of council-controlled intersections, they do 10 years post-opening. Transport and Main Roads only require at year of opening. And then, based on the results of that assessment, they'll look at whether mitigation measures are required to mitigate any impact. That's submitted to council. We then review that. TMR also review it, where there's intersections that they're triggered to assess. And then, as I said, that's interrogated by council, and we will impose conditions if mitigation measures are required.
So would you mind, so Chris, could I seek clarity? So you made a point there that it assumes amount of traffic at peak times through an intersection. So Harbour Shores is under construction on the other side of the road. Obviously, if we went and put tube counters on the road today, there's not residential traffic from that site yet. But in the model that's assessed by council, provided by the applicant, the amount of vehicle movements from Harbour Shores is included in that model.
That's correct. So the traffic counts that Bitsios undertook as part of their assessment was pre-development for the Harbour Shores. And so what they've done is they've factored that in. They've looked at the TIA that was submitted for that. They've included the traffic generation of that development. And importantly, that DA included new fourth legs to 2 Oxley Drive intersections. So that's all been factored into the assessment.
It's just my last question on traffic, and we've proposed some alternative possible solutions to the crossing that could have mitigated the loss of on-street off-street parking. I understand that the retention of off-street parking isn't a requirement under the city plan, so that's why it wasn't pursued. But when we're assessing this as an impact accessible development and the impact that it has on the local area, why can't those sort of conditions be imposed to protect the loss, because it will have an impact on the surrounding community?
Look, those conditions can be imposed, but through our assessment, we deemed it that it was appropriate, the number of crossings they proposed, given their unusually large site and 500-metre frontage. As I mentioned, the loss is only about 15 spaces for vehicle crossings themselves, and we deemed that to be satisfactory.
So not so much the concern about the vehicle crossings, but the impact of the pedestrian crossing. Could we pursue a different outcome that still achieves the safety uplift that we're looking for from that crossing, but that doesn't create so much loss of spaces?
Look, it is possible, but without a detailed design, we don't really understand the impact, whether it would require more land from either the subject site or potentially maybe even require land from the Harbour Town Shopping Centre to the southern approach. So without that design process and that concept drawing, it's hard to gauge or understand whether that's an achievable condition.
Councillor Gates, did you have a question of Chris?
I did for Chris. Thanks, through you, Chair. As a rule, generally speaking, do traffic signals take less or more space than a roundabout?
Roundabouts typically take more space, but I do note that this has been retrofitted into an existing environment, and I do think they've, condensed the roundabout to really fit
It looks a big roundabout looking at that visual that we have, which is why I've asked the question. Is it possible, Chairman, to seek a redesign incorporating signals at this location so that the pedestrian crossing can be incorporated into signals and free up a few more car parks on road?
So I'm happy to, perhaps if we go on to other questions about other parts of the report, and if officers could turn their mind to what a condition might look like that allows that to be imposed by committee.
Thank you.
And then we can keep moving forward. Other questions for Chris? That's right, we can get Chris back up if we need to. Other questions in general for officers? Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Page 348. So no wind tunnelling testing was undertaken for the subject development. Is this typical for a development of this scale? And have we any reason for concern regarding wind tunnelling as a result of this development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Curtis, I'll just call up Tim Davern from Architecture Assessment.
Okay, through the Chair. So the proposed building's been Building 1 and 2, 11 stories, 3 and 4, 9 stories and 7. It's on the lower end of when officers would be requesting a wind impact assessment. So the applicant did submit a wind impact assessment, or that was a desktop study, which identified various aspects of the development that performed well, and then other aspects that needed some form of wind mitigation. So officers were comfortable with that report in the early stage and the elements that were incorporated into the actual built form, and we've included a condition that wind modelling would be undertaken as part of the conditions of approval.
Thank you, Chair. Can I seek comfort through the committee? Do you typically see wind studies for a 9-story to 11?
So no. So typically officers would be requesting wind studies for much taller developments. However, in terms of the harbour shores to the east, because it's next to a water body, it's actually a beneficial process to make sure that the wind is actually managed appropriately.
Thank you. And just one last question, Chair, and it's to do with some residents expressing concerns with non-compliant setbacks from the street frontage, which present at pinch points of the arc of this block. Can I ask why officers have accepted an alternative outcome with regards to the setbacks, and does it benefit the overall context of the site?
Through the Chair, you happy for me to answer that?
Yeah, through the Chair, you can go to page 392 of the officer report. I'll just try and grab a site plan. So on this site plan here, you can see that there's a red dotted line along the frontage and rear and sides. The rear is 6 metres, the front is 4 metres. The acceptable outcome is actually 4 metres up to 23 metres in height, and then 6 metres above. Generally, you can see that the non-compliances are to the extremities of the build form due to the shape of the site. So outside of that, the built form is generally set back quite well from the street front, with the exception of the proposed roundabout area where there will be some resumption for that to occur. So the built form kind of straddles or is sited to the best of its ability on a curved site. And those non-compliances are listed on page 392, and they're very minor to the extremities of the built form.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I just had a question in regards to the actual boardwalk. So in terms of private, we've got the body corporate, I'm guessing, are going to retain ownership, and we've got 5 different CTS structures. When we're saying there's public access, what does that look like? Is there a gate and it's locked at certain times, or is it open at all times to the public?
Through the chair, they're open at all times to the public, and that's managed through each CMSs for the body corp.
And just one quick follow-on. So does that mean that any maintenance or upgrades to that boardwalk that are required would always retain the responsibility of those body corporates and not the city?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
More questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just interested on, obviously, stage 1 with the 50% uplift and looking at the built form. I mean, typically I find to see when the uplift is applied, there's a recessing of the upper floors, but I noticed there's no sort of reduced bulk at the upper levels, and wondering how officers sort of support that it doesn't promote like a bulky form, especially at those upper levels where we're seeking uplift.
Through the chair. So as part of the assessment, officers assess the built form in terms of obviously the appearance, the movement and setbacks and site cover, a cumulative sort of assessment. We also look at the broader area to see the built form in that area. So in terms of the subject proposal, yes, it doesn't have a recessive upper level, but to the northeast there's a building of similar scale and sort of form in terms of it doesn't necessarily have a fully recessive upper level. And as you go through, the built form has, when you look at the street frontage, has significant movement. There's movement to the side. So from a form perspective and a floor plate perspective, there is quite a lot of modulation. And then in addition, the applicant through the development assessment process incorporated quite a lot of high quality detailing to the proposed building. It has bronze glazing, so it actually provides quite a attractive built form outcome for the area.
Follow up on that. Thank you for that. So with the multiple stages, obviously they don't seek the full uplift, so that kind of gives a varied skyline. I suppose my question is more around future other changes. I mean, is this decision, especially stage 1, for the 50% uplift, sort of based on that other levels are not seeking the full uplift? So I'm just looking for some future assurance that the first one doesn't get built at 50% and then all of them go 50%, which I think would have a significantly greater impact.
Through the chair, so obviously officers assess the application that's in front of them. The applicant had proposed a lowering of the buildings that turns around to the north, which responds to the context, be it that you're 11 to 12 story building to the northeast, you've got 10 story buildings to the west, and then you've got the low density residential to the north. So it responds appropriately to that. Also, the rooftop garden, if you like, or terrace to the upper levels also provides that high quality appearance. There's additional detailing that's being proposed. So while we can't talk to any future applications, as a whole, the landscaping, the appearance, that recessive upper level for buildings 3 and 4 has been taken into consideration as part of the assessment.
Councillor Doran, I think, was just in before Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions, but I'd like to first start by thanking and applauding the applicant for providing 90 additional car parks over and above the AO compliance. That's certainly very welcome as you get into the suburbs away from light rail. I want to just quickly pick up on the point from Councillor Fowler with regards to the boardwalk. Is there public toilets available, accessible to the public as they're walking around? It is quite a large development.
Through the chair, within stage 1, ground level, there's the commercial tenancies that have amenities associated with them, so you can access there.
Have we conditioned those to be open at certain times or available to the public, or will that be via a key structure?
Through the chair, there's no specific condition that says that.
And have we mandated any lighting requirements around that boardwalk for safety of residents and pedestrians walking around?
Through the chair, there is a standard condition within the Part B of the conditions package. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's to do with lighting within community spaces, communal spaces.
Presumably, standard condition will be at a level demonstrated to be safe and illuminated to a level that allowed some safety but doesn't impact too much on the residents that are on the ground floor, first floor?
Through the chair, that's correct. So there would be a nuisance condition as well that ensures that there's no light spill. Yeah.
And I just, Mr. Chair, just got one further query. It's in relation to page 359 on the building height, where it talks about key considerations. And the last line just says the building height of 39 metres will not impact on the safe, secure and efficient functioning of the Gold Coast Airport. Given it's in bigger waters, are you referring to the Southport Club not too far away, or?
That's a standard requirement of all the 50% uplift provisions.
Even though it's in bigger water?
Yeah, anywhere in the city has to be considered. Same as the Spit Master Plan has to be considered with every 50% uplift application.
And one final question, when working with Bizios in relation to the traffic management plan, there's 511 apartments, presumably there's 1,200 beds. Was there an impact assessment done in relation to the strain that it could place on the infrastructure? I note that in the report it says that 300 odd movements each day was the assessment. With regards to exits and entries from the site in the AM and PM, it does seem a little low for 1,200 beds.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the 300 movements is in a peak hour. So that's on any given hour within a peak period.
During what time frame is peak? Are we talking 7 to 9?
Yeah, that general time frame for the morning and sort of 4 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. But that's just in any given hour. So that's the peak of the peak within the... Yeah.
And was there assessment done to indicate that the local infrastructure, road and infrastructure, can sustain this increased density without requiring council to come back and make any improvements within a short period of time outside of our forward schedule?
Are you specifically referring to intersections?
Road network, including surfacing?
Yeah, so the assessment, as I said, looked at council and state-controlled networks. That was shown to be minimal impact to those in terms of operation. In terms of the road network itself, light vehicle traffic typically has minimal impact to the life of pavements, so I wouldn't expect any significant impact resulting from the development.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Gates.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Just following on from the discussion about the proposed uplift for stage 1, we've seen a lot of other change applications come forward. I don't know that you can answer this, but would the approval of the uplift for stage 1 become a precedent should the applicant come back to us and request the same uplift for the other buildings? Because I note in the report you compare the heights of other buildings in the area, I guess to support the uplift that is being provided here.
Through the chair, first of all, there'd be nothing preventing or prohibiting the developer from coming in to make a change application, so that could happen. All I could say though is that when if the developer did make that change, we would have to assess the whole change again. I don't think it's necessarily true that because we've approved an 11-storey building as part of this DA that a future one would automatically be approved. We'd have to go through the uplift test all over again and assess it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Young?
Is it open to us to impose a condition that does restrict the applicant from doing that?
We don't have the legal ability to impose a condition. So just so the members of the gallery heard that this council does not have the ability to oppose a legal condition to restrict a future development. That is not available to us under the state legislation. So no, we could put that condition in and the applicant would have it wiped out very quickly. Other questions for officers? Councillor Gates?
No, look, I'll move it if you like.
Yep, so final questions and we'll go to a mover.
Just because the questions were over, I wanted to see whether the officers were going to come back to us about the roundabout intersection query you posed earlier.
So that's before I went to Councillor Gates. I was going to ask officers if we had a condition that enables us to make the applicant come back with a different proposal.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have one drafted right now. It's something we could do if that's what the committee wanted between now and the council meeting. I guess my advice at this point in time is that we've done the assessment on traffic impacts. I just had a chat with Chris before. At the moment, the development is having a vehicle queue of one car at the roundabout. To warrant signalised intersection, we'd almost have to get to the point where that roundabout was failing. So a one-car queue is not failing at the moment. So on that basis, I don't know how we could reasonably impose a signalised intersection upgrade.
So signalised intersection wasn't the only proposal asked. You know, a signalised pedestrian crossing, a roundabout with different refuge set up instead. It wasn't specific to signalising the roundabout, just that, I guess, further analysis that all options were looked at and what the pros and cons of each of those options were.
Yep, so through you, Mr. Chair, we won't have a condition at this point in time. We can come up with some conditions, but they will be probably not based on any traffic impact assessments between now and the full council.
Councillor Gates, your thoughts?
I'm not going to move the item. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Mick.
I'm not moving the item.
So, through to officers, is this a case of you need more time here this morning to prepare a condition, or you really need some more time before full council to come up with accurate wording?
Through you, Mr. Chair, can comfortably say we won't have a condition right now. Between now and the council meeting, we'll do our best. All I'm flagging is that based on the traffic information and the traffic impacts that we do know about, we would struggle to recommend to the council for a condition for signalised intersection. There's probably further complications with that signalised crossings or intersections may cause queuing back onto the state-controlled road, so there is an unknown there with what the state government might say about that. They're a concurrence agency to this application, so in your hands, but we can try and come up with a condition that we think satisfies what the committee's asking for, but I'm a little bit unclear myself as to that.
Okay, so I'll take that as the response from Mick for now and leave it that if this committee wishes to impose a condition, we can do so. We'll just have to come up with it by ourselves, but very much cognizant of Mick's final points there that this is more than just the pedestrian crossing point, but any proposed changes or any lead-in we give to this might force a complete review of the entire traffic arrangement and further SARA response, which would have to be considered. So a final call, is there any other further questions from officers on this application?
Through the chair, Councillor Hummel, sorry, I just wanted to circle back on Councillor Curtis's question about the wind. So unfortunately, the wind condition was mistakenly omitted from the conditions in the report. So that's just a standard certification of works condition for the wind. So it's basically just to ensure that the wind mitigation measures that have come forward in the desktop study are present in the building approval plans. So we've sent that condition through to the Secretary this morning for your consideration if you want to include it.
So thank you, Laura. I wasn't aware of that. So if we've got that adjusted condition to be included in. Councillors, if that's all the questions for officers, I'm seeking a mover, which isn't going to be Councillor Gates from the sounds of it. All right. So I'm going to flag that while I'm happy to move it today, I will be working with officers before full council to see if there is an adjustment that can be made to then make a change at full council of that specific condition. But I'm happy enough to move as is today and do that work in the meantime. So I'm happy to move the recommendation. Councillor Young is happy to second. I'll speak to it quickly. I'm very cognizant of time, but we'll just speak to it quickly because I think it's really important to acknowledge that we've got several community members here today in the public gallery, and I'm aware of more watching online. I just wanted to make the point that a lot of these community members that are here today also attended the town hall meeting that Councillor Curtis facilitated and have been in a lot of ongoing correspondence with the councillor and city officers for some months. I just wanted to take the chance to sincerely thank you all for your strong interest in the application. The vast majority of residents have taken a really respectful approach to this, and it's been really pleasant to be part of. I'm happy to support this application today for a range of reasons. I'm going to go through a little bit of detail. This is a big site, 22,000 square metres. It's a big holding of land. The proposal under consideration today would deliver 511 dwellings and about 1,200 bedrooms over 6 buildings to be staged over what I would guess is a fairly long period. For those interested, on page 346, there's more detail on the breakdown of the dwellings, so the 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom components and what that looks like. This is a big development, and it is right that it's been so heavily scrutinised by the Divisional Council and the local community. For such a big site, it's actually a relatively low site cover that's proposed, so 46%, compared to what we would see in a lot of other parts of the Gold Coast, especially along the coastal strip. That as a site cover over such a big site is fairly low. It's a site density of 1 bed per 33 square metres as proposed, which again, compared to most other sites in the city, we would see a much intensified density. By only having 46% site cover, it means that 16% of the site is to be dedicated to public open space, including the boardwalk around the water's edge, which, as Councillor Fowler teased out today, would be a public asset that remains at the cost burden of future body corporates of this site, not to ratepayers. One point I picked up in the report that I thought was quite interesting is that the other part of having a low site cover is that the deep planting requirements hit 6% of the site. I think there are a lot of other development sites across the city that would love to have that much deep planting. 6% of the site with deep planting will go a long way to making a strong contribution to the landscaping over the entire site. By far, the greatest concern, and that is very clear through the 252 submissions and through the correspondence with officers, has been around the loss of on-street car parking. A bit of context that wasn't discussed today in the officers' report in too much detail is that has come about because there's some really poor development outcomes on surrounding sites. Some buildings that had a gross undersupply of car parking, which has led to, and while I appreciate on-street car parking is a premium everywhere in the city, it is really, really a premium in this part of the city around these developments. So I can absolutely understand why residents are so concerned about any loss of car parking on the street. And while I appreciate the work of officers in working with the applicant to reduce the amount of VXOs, I am interested between this committee and full council looking at what other options there may be with that pedestrian crossing, and I would flag with the applicant if they happen to be watching that they'll probably be included in that. They own both sides of the road, so maybe they can be part of the solution to help get a better outcome. Councillor Gates's flyover idea would be suitable. I think in the point too with the loss of on-street car parking, while 500 metre frontage is a massive frontage, the horseshoe shape of the site is the real difficulty with it. Inside the curve, big horseshoe shape, it means to meet the Australian standards, wherever there's a VXO, sight lines become really difficult. I'm comforted by the fact that we got rid of the VXOs that we could, and that we have squeezed the sight lines down to the absolute minimum everywhere we can, but look forward to if there's possible future opportunities to reduce that even further. While I absolutely respect the concerns about the local road network, as we've heard here today, there's been quite a comprehensive assessment done of current day data through those roads intersections, including the impacts of surrounding intersections. It was very clear at the town hall meeting there was a desire to understand more about, is it just the impact of this application, or is there a quantitative assessment done over the entire network? So we've had confirmation today that that is based on the most recent traffic data on the road, be it from the end of 2022, early 2023, and that it includes any parts to do with harbour shores or other developments for known impacts coming from those sites. So that quantitative and qualitative assessment has been done. I really do understand the concerns of residents about on-street car parking and the local road network, but have to balance that with the view that this is a big site that this city plan for 10 years has envisaged being developed for this kind of intensity. Since 2016, this site has been inside the zone. It's had the 50% uplift provisions. It has been the expected outcome to see development on this size. As I made the point, 511 dwellings is not as many as they could have gone for. They are quite high in the density part, and I reflect the comments made by the committee that we hope not to see changes in the future that introduce more height or introduce more density, but would flag again the point that we don't have the ability to stop them from doing that. I'm happy to move today's officer recommendation. Again, flag, I will be talking with officers before full council about a possible condition change, specifically with that pedestrian crossing in the hope of keeping on-street car parking. Anyone wish to speak against the application? Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. I recognise there's a housing supply problem right across the country, and that this application is favourable in that regard. What I'm struggling with today is the fact that there have been provided significant uplift, which has caused impacts on the area. And so it's really disappointing to me to hear that those impacts in terms of replacement of a roundabout with signals can only be considered in terms of the impact on the road network itself, rather than the impact of the additional height that we're giving and additional density. So all of the additional height that is being supported today has a correlation with the traffic and the loss of car parking on street that the residents are concerned about. Look, I will reserve my ability to change my decision at full council, but what's before me today causes me concern, so I won't be supporting the application.
Speaker 4. Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chairman. I appreciate that the concerns of the local community have been very well interrogated, and I'm thankful to Councillor Curtis for the way she's presented information to all of us prior to the committee on behalf of her residents. I think it's entirely open for us to apply a condition to require the installation of traffic signals at the intersection, but ultimately the test is in the court, and if the applicant seeks to challenge that, we've got to have strong grounds to support it, and you know that, of course. And I think that's the warning that we've been given by the General Manager of Planning, is that we can include a condition as such, but it's going to be ultimately tested against reasonable and relevant. And in this case, the facts before us and the facts that would be presented to a court would demonstrate that signals are probably neither relevant or reasonable. So I've got that air of caution about how we deal with this when it comes to full council, but I'm supportive of the motion now.
Speaker against? I would open the floor to anyone wishing to speak. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers, for the extensive and ongoing communication with the Division 4 office. I genuinely appreciate the thorough assessment, as is evidenced through a comprehensive 242-page report. However, I do want to take the opportunity to represent my community's genuine concern for the impact this development may have on the surrounding traffic network, despite findings from the assessment to the contrary. I want to highlight the lived experience of local residents who every day deal with the consequence of previous development approvals made under the 2003 planning scheme that have resulted in an under-provision of necessary on-site car parking for existing apartments. The consequence of this is clearly evidenced on the surrounding streets. I invite anybody to drive Oxley Drive after hours when most residents are home. It'll be very clear to you that there is a problem at that site. And the very fact that the applicant has deemed it necessary to propose a staggering 90-car surplus, I really hope that draws attention to the magnitude of the existing car parking issues surrounding this site. In my very short time in council, I have not seen an application come through this committee that proposed anywhere near that figure. So it's something that I urge us to consider for future deliberations regarding car parking provisions in our future planning scheme. Here we have a live example of what happens when car provisions are inadequate. They do not only put pressure on the surrounding on-street network, the problem doesn't miraculously resolve. It creates a very real demand burden for the future developments. So we are extremely lucky here that Lewis Land are a highly respected and quality developer, and they know the market they are catering for will demand the extra car parking, and thankfully they cater to a market that can afford it. What it hasn't allowed for is a proposal to be made for more affordable housing choices. Having regard for the previous approval over this site, that I note represented a taller and more dense outcome per metre squared with lower car parking requirements based on the 2003 scheme, I'm at least confident that this new application is able to provide a more realistic car parking ratio and one that far exceeds the code requirement, because car parking was by far the #1 concern raised to me throughout the extensive consultation. Car parking aside, traffic impacts for this development remain a fundamental concern for the community. These concerns have been circulated to all planning committee members, and I trust my colleagues have diligently considered their concerns when formulating their position. Whilst I support the investigation of an alternate crossing or roundabout solution, I am concerned that a signalised solution may actually cause more angst for residents, and I'd be keen to investigate the best possible outcome that doesn't impact both traffic and minimalises the car parking loss on street.
Any other genuine contributions? Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little torn on this one, but I'm going to support your recommendation, your motion today, Chair, on the basis that we do see some work around that intersection before full council. My concerns are around the loss of on-street car parking, and I know the General Manager's comments. It's not just about the capacity of the road, it's about whether or not the current network is taking up too much of that on-street parking and whether that can be combined, essentially. So I'll support this today, and I look forward to seeing whether or not there can be some change come to full council, but I will reserve an open mind at full council. Thanks.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. I have to say that I absolutely agree with Councillor Doran. I think that we just probably have to give it over to the applicants themselves to really consider, if we put that condition forward, to actually, going forward with it, because if they are, as Councillor Curtis says, if they've been conscious of parking in the area, conscious of the amenity of the area and the residents they're going to be supplying housing for, surely that should carry over to the traffic solution as well, the best traffic solution. So I'd encourage the applicant, when we enforce this, when we put this condition on their approval, I'd be encouraging them to accept it. Thank you.
I'm going to close debate there. I won't close debate today because I suspect we might have more chat at full council. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Officers, thank you as always. That takes us to item 6.6.
Chairman, this is the one that I have my conflict on, that I don't need to mention it again. Thank you.
All good to go? Good morning. Let's have a presentation.
How about now? The application is subject to impact assessment because it exceeds the code assessable building height. Officers are recommending approval. The subject site comprises a single square allotment with an area of 488 square metres. The site has a 20-metre wide road frontage to the Gold Coast Highway and is currently improved by a 2-storey building containing 4 units. As you can see from this slide, the site adjoins a council-owned car park to the rear, with the Palm Beach Surf Life Saving Club and the beach further to the east. To the north of the site is a recently constructed 9-storey, 29-metre high multiple dwelling apartment building known as the Munro, with 2-storey commercial development to the south. The site is located in the medium density residential zone in the southern half of the Palm Beach coastal strip, immediately to the east of the Palm Beach centre zone. You can also see Andy Frizzell Park is identified on the slide as some public open space. As I mentioned, this application is an other change to an existing approval. The existing approval over the site is for a 29-metre high, 9-storey multiple dwelling development. This application seeks to add 5 additional stories, increasing the height by 14.5 metres, adding 3 new units, including a 2-storey penthouse. The applicant is using the uplift test provisions within the strategic framework for the additional height and yield, and is seeking a maximum 50% uplift afforded by specific outcome 3.3.2.19. Pages 587 through 589 have the key development details, councillors, if anyone would like to view them. This slide shows the approved development outcome on the left and the proposed outcome on the right. As you can see, the proposal has taken on a completely new design as part of the other change application, with a superior building design and appearance as required by the uplift test, which is considered to meet the excellent standard of appearance provisions. Getting into the specifics, the development includes 3 basement levels with a cutout next to the Gold Coast Highway to provide for deep planting. The development provides 19 resident and 3 visitor car parks. They're over on resident and under on visitors. At this time, councillors, I need to draw your attention to page 663 of your agenda, where I've picked up a small error in the car parking table. The table states that there is 15 spaces required to meet the AO. That was on the basis of the proposal having 10 units as it was originally lodged. Through the course of the assessment process, they added an additional unit. So the car parking required to meet the AO increases by 1.5 to 16.5 spaces. You can't have half a car parking space, so we round that up to 17. So the AO requirement to meet the resident car parking spaces is 17. As you can see in that table there, they've provided 19 spaces, so they still have a surplus.
Officers will be recommending through the conditions they convert one of their resident spaces to be a visitor car parking space. So they will be compliant on both the resident and visitor spaces. At the ground level, we can see access taken from the Gold Coast Highway. There are 3 visitor car parking spaces provided at grade. A separate pedestrian access and lobby is provided in the southwest corner. Wheelie bins will be serviced for this development as per the existing approval, serviced from the Gold Coast Highway. There is 1 extra general waste and recycle bin proposed as part of this other change application. Level 1, as you can see there on the right, has the communal open space area and includes a range of uses including a barbecue area, pool and a gym. The floor levels above from level 2 are all residential. 11 3-bedroom apartments are proposed in a 1 per floor arrangement. The exception to the 1 per floor arrangement is the penthouse proposed over the top 2 levels. The penthouse has its own lift internal so that there is no visible lift overrun. The building height / uplift provisions is probably the key consideration that officers dealt with through the assessment of this application, which we commonly refer to as specific outcome 3.3.2.19. Provisions B and C were probably the most relevant of those provisions, so I'll touch on them briefly today. The local identity and sense of place is a key one for the uplift test provision, and officers have undertaken a character assessment of the existing and approved built forms in the local area. The crux of that character analysis is depicted on the slide that you're looking at now. On the left in red, there are the existing and approved high-rise buildings over 32 metres in height. There are 7 examples of these within the local area. On the right in blue, the examples of medium rise forms up to 32 metres in height. We have 14 of those, which are predominantly 9 stories and 29 metres, which is the code accessible building height. So in total, we have 21 examples of medium and high-rise built forms within 750 metres of the subject site, which demonstrate a clear tower building typology. 5 of those examples are on the eastern side of the Gold Coast Highway, ranging from 34 metres up to 43 metres, demonstrating that there is an emerging high-rise built form on the east of the highway. One of those numbers, actually, number 107 Jefferson, which is number 4 on the red side, has actually just been appealed by the submitter, so we'll see where that one goes. But the same determinations apply. Also of note is the site's location immediately adjacent to the centre zone, which has a code accessible height of 39 metres and no 50% cap on the uplift where you're in that centre zone. Given its location, officers consider that the site will be viewed in the context of buildings within that centre zone, which in the future, as it progresses and develops, will likely be of a greater scale, intensity and possibly height. Look, there's no denying that this site is a small site. It's 488 square metres, but it has a 20 square metre frontage to the Gold Coast Highway. But what a small site does achieve is a fairly small building footprint, and the building footprint of this tower is 254 square metres. That would be one of, if not the smallest building floor plates for a high-rise tower in Palm Beach. That will serve to reduce its presence within a landscape of towers that are often on bigger sites containing larger rectangular buildings. The other provision I wanted to touch on today was the well-managed interface provisions. To the north, you can see there, the proposal is an improvement on the existing approval. It has a very similar length, as you can see, less than half of the adjoining site, a slightly increased building separation, but most notably an improved privacy outcome where the proposal interfaces with the adjoining neighbour. To the south is a 2-storey commercial development. Officers were actually able to achieve some significant improvements to the southern interface during the course of the assessment process, and as a result of those changes we consider it meets the uplift test provisions. In response to public notifications, officers received 17 properly made and 1 not properly made submission. The key matters raised are listed on the slide before you. Of the 18 submissions received, 13 were received from the adjoining Munro building to the north. Officers have considered the matters raised in all of the submissions, and they're detailed on pages 672 through to 677 should you wish to review them. After a detailed assessment, officers consider the proposal complies with all applicable codes, including the framework and the uplift test provisions within specific outcome 3.3.2.19. The building has been suitably designed to support an increase in building height, and consequently officers' recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you for the presentation. I had Councillor Gates and then Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chairman. Through you, where is it proposed the additional visitor car parking space will be located, please?
Through the Chair, officers have conditioned amended plans requirement, but I expect that to be a conversion of one of the resident spaces in the basement to be converted to visitor space.
So how will it be accessible? I'm presuming that it won't be fully open 24/7 for anyone to drive in.
That's correct. There is a gate or a security gate on the basement, so if the 3 visitor spaces were full, a guest may have to call up the owner of the unit to try and access the basement to get in.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question about the waste removal. Was any thought given for an industrial bin rather than wheelie bins, seeing it's the pickup has to be on the Gold Coast Highway?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct, Councillor O'Neill. There was some consideration given to that. We've got an other change approval where we've currently got 8 units proposed. They're adding 3 more units. So the existing approval was serviced by wheelie bins from the highway. That same provision is proposed. I think it had to do predominantly with the limited manoeuvrability of the site and the requirement for a waste vehicle to exit in a forward gear if it were to enter the site. The state won't allow a vehicle to back out onto the state-controlled road, so wheelie bins has been proposed. They're 360 litres, they're the larger wheelie bins. 2 additional bins are proposed as part of this other change, so it'll be a total of 9, 5 recycling, 4 general waste.
And just another question, if I can, Chair. So will there be the need to install some sort of loading bay parking in front of that building to accommodate waste pickup?
As in a bin positioning adjacent to the highway, that sort of thing? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, either a loading bay or signage, I guess, within the loading bay saying within these hours there'll be a waste pickup. That usually happens in CBD areas that I'm aware of.
So maybe just to follow on that with the question, have our waste area provided anything in the conditions that specifies will have to be a signed waste collection zone on the road frontage? Or will that be a part of a future detail in the application?
Through the Chair, I'd imagine that would be part of any future application. As you can see on the slide there is space within the frontage for the wheelie bins to be accommodated.
So within that space, if it's just waste though, but if it's waste and recycle, that's double that.
That's all the bins.
That's all the bins?
So it would just be like the waste truck coming along other dwellings on the Gold Coast Highway picking up their bins.
And so just to confirm, so was this re-sent to SARA for consideration?
Through the Chair, it was. A revised referral agency response was received as part of the other change. They've endorsed the waste management plan, which includes the pickup of bins from the Gold Coast Highway.
Can I just have one question not related to that? I noticed that during construction they will have to put a pipe underneath the council car park. Now that council car park services the Palm Beach Surf Club, and as I can tell you, you can never get a park there to start with. Do you know how long you may not be able to answer this, but would there be any length of time that some of that car park would be out of action because of those works?
Through the chair, there will be some length of time when that car park may be out of action. That level of detail is not provided to us through the DA. They have included that land parcel as part of the application to include that pipe through, but that's probably something that we'd have to know post development permit.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Just to follow on from Councillor O'Neill's comment about waste, through your chair to Adam, I'm reading the SARA response on page 783, and it talks about a no stopping yellow line must be provided the full curbside servicing point at ground level. And I think if you refer to your images on screen, to me it looks like there's a yellow no stopping line pretty much for the entire length of the frontage. I just want to confirm, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So, just to confirm, so yellow no stopping 24/7.
I'd have to check those provisions of the SARA comments.
Okay. Do you mind bringing up that render of the front of the building there? Sorry, I think it's the last slide or the first slide.
Sure.
It's page 783.
That one?
No, back one. Yeah, if you can see there essentially, I think the render, and even in our presentation, I believe there's a full render, but essentially the yellow line continues from in front of the heavy duty VXO, which is wider because I gather they're coming in off the Gold Coast Highway, but it does extend the full length of the green verge. I did a little quick field test on those 9 bins. I'm not sure that's sort of in terms of the actual dimensions as accurate, because you've got 9 bins, essentially about 9 metres once we have spaces. So I imagine this waste will take up the full length and the yellow line will take up the full length. So I guess I'm concerned about, we're removing Gold Coast Highway parking. There's cafes, there's commercial there. Concerned about why, if we're going up, we couldn't condition the waste on site.
Through the chair, as I mentioned before, for waste servicing from the Gold Coast Highway, the waste vehicles have to enter and exit the site in a forward gear.
Yeah.
So there's no real ability for a site of this size to allow a waste vehicle, well, the state won't allow a waste vehicle to back out onto the Gold Coast Highway. The applicant proposed the wheelie bin servicing arrangement as per the original. The state were accepting of that. Through our assessment, we determined there appeared to be sufficient frontage on the site to accommodate those bins. Yes, there may be the loss of a car park potentially on the Gold Coast Highway there, but that was considered an appropriate outcome for this development.
So can I see clarity? SARA have provided that condition, including the yellow line. Are we able to go over the top of that condition with a requirement for just signage on bin days instead?
Through the chair, they're a concurrence agency or an advice agency to this proposal. Generally speaking, they overrule us in terms of imposing those conditions. We could have a conversation with them to see if they would be interested in amending it, but ultimately it's their decision.
Yeah. So we'll have to look into that, because a yellow line there 7 days a week makes no sense. It works everywhere else just to have signage that make it clear it's a bin collection zone between these hours. I don't know why this site should be treated differently. Councillor Gates, Councillor Martin, are you done for now? I'll go to Councillor Gates. Or do you want to? Yep.
Thank you. It's just on the same issue while we're here. Is it 9 bins that will be there, or 18? Are they having a recycling bin and a green bin?
Through the chair, they've got 5 general waste bins at 360 litres and 4, or a total of 9.
Okay.
5 recycling, 4 general waste, the bigger bin size.
Sorry.
Just for a bit of context on that discussion with TMR, there was a similar development a bit further up the length of the Gold Coast Highway in Palm Beach that had a timed spot for the waste vehicles to service. it ended up going to a yellow line because people were often parking in the time space and the residents were missing out on their bin getting collected.
So are the garbage collectors allowed to stop on a yellow line?
Through the
Because
chair,
I thought a
not
yellow
sure of
line
that
was no stopping regardless.
I think waste management is considered an essential service, and
they're
during
allowed.
operation we can, yeah.
Okay. And can you just confirm for me, please, through the chair, that the condition provided by Sarah related to the first application and not the other change?
Through the chair, we got a revised referral agency response from SARA on the 30th of September of this year that relates to the other change. So their conditions have been updated to reflect this other change approval.
And they're still happy with the situation?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Might put a pin in bins for a second, and I suppose the question I have, there's a couple of queries on setbacks and site cover. Obviously, there was a code approval, but it's seeking the uplift. But I was surprised to see, particularly setbacks, and I note there were some improvements at ground level, but clearly the interface with the car park is a little bit of a concern for me. So that setback went at level 1, 5.8 metres to 2.8 to the wall, and a typical, essentially from 5.8 metres down to 2 metres, or 1.7 metres to the outermost point. I understand it's car park now, but it's not a grassed open space. That's not going to, anything's going to occur. I'm just concerned, is this going to limit our future development potential of that car park, given it is at capacity? We'll most likely go to multi-storey and or partner with future development. And I'm really concerned that they might be able to hang out their windows and touch hands at the 2 metre setback.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did consider the car park at the rear of the site. We acknowledge it is zoned medium density, but it is a council-owned car park. There's no amenity issues current with this tower being slightly closer to that car park. I don't think this development will prevent any further development within the car park itself. There's a basement that will be contained to the property. Any future development of the car park shouldn't be impacted by this proposal.
Yeah, follow on from that setback. And so the northern setback, where the bulk of the submitter objections came from, I did note that to the wall from the code approval was 4 metres and down to 3.6. And I know we've got some higher privacy fixed walls, but I was surprised to see, given the objections, that actually is now closer as a typical setback.
Through the chair, the setbacks to the north are slightly improved, I think, overall from the code assessable outcome, where it was 6.8 metres, I think, in parts, and now we're pushing to 7 metre separation between dwellings. Fairly comparable with the code assessable outcome. As we mentioned, there's an improved privacy interface between the two with the screening. Where the development exceeds the height of the adjoining building to the north, we don't consider that setback to be, offensive or anything. There's no shadow proposed over that building. Even in winter, they don't get any shadow to the north. We were comfortable with the well-managed interface provisions.
Or Councillor Martin?
So I just wanted to move on to site cover because I think under the code approval, look, it's marginally outside sort of an AO, but with the uplift, the site cover is significantly increased. And if you go page 646 on the report, I was a little confused there because I guess ground in the applicant is ground, but I take it that the AO is from 50% is the AO up to 8 stories, but I think right there, because that's showing 9 to 13 stories, but the building's 14 stories, so I think maybe there's some massaging there. But essentially, I take it that 5 upper levels where the AO is 40%. We've got a site cover of 52%. And I know that's 12%, but that from a 40% AO, that's a 30% increase on the acceptable outcome. And I'm just concerned that that site cover at that higher level, how far does that sit outside the sort of wedding cake sort of site coverage?
Through the chair, I'd have to take that question on notice in terms of how far outside the wedding cake provisions. I did have a look through the application material and I couldn't find any of those provided with the application, but I'd have to double check. But from officers' perspective, it meets the performance outcome where the building size is sufficiently small. It's a fairly compact tower. It's got a balance of landscaping at ground level and some up the southwestern corner, as you can see. That officers were comfortable with supporting the 52% site cover through to for the upper levels of the tower, notwithstanding the AO of 40%.
Councillor Patterson, you had a question?
Yes, thanks. Regarding the bins, I'd be interested to know whether we have a target on what should be the minimum amount of waste per unit, because based on this, we've gone down to, I would assume it's 240. If we can, we put 240 of general waste and recycling in. So with this, we've got 55% of that on general waste and 75% of that on recycled waste. At what point do we go, look, that's too low a percentage of what we would normally accept? Because I'm just seeing, and the fact that they don't actually have their own bins. Come Christmas time and holiday, everybody's is just, I can see a bit of a nightmare starting there.
Through the chair, that's correct. We are proposing 360 litre wheelie bins as part of this development. They're the largest wheelie bin size that we have. They provided a waste management plan as part of their application. It was reviewed by council officers and they determined that the number of bins proposed is sufficient to address the waste needs of the residents. They have a carousel down in the ground level waste area so that those bins will turn and be filled without any requirement for human intervention. The recycling waste is dealt with through the residents coming and putting their items down in those bins. I don't have an answer in terms of what the threshold is, but we're only dealing with 11 units on this particular site. It was considered by council officers that the waste provision that they've proposed was adequate to address the waste generated by the development.
So maybe on notice, Chair, but I would be really interested to know, because just on some quick calculations there, the 360 of 3 or 4 for 11 versus what we have an 8 and what we'd have of 240, we're at 55% of what you would normally expect. So there's got to be a level where they say, no, that's not okay, and that would be useful to know. Maybe before, if we could get that in an email, thank you.
Certainly.
Councillor Needoran.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just struggling a little bit with the additional visitors car park, as Councillor Gates indicated. A similar concern that when it goes into the basement, how is it going to be operationally a legitimate visitor car park rather than just a designated visitor car park, but operationally just used by someone who actually can access the basement? Have you got any examples where this has worked, where for a visitor to use the car park, they've actually got to get under through a key or through a swab or a fob?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's very common in a gated community outcome where you tap on the intercom and they'll let you through the gate and you park in visitor bays. We've all done that. It's not prevalent in residential tower developments. Most of the visitor car parking is at grade and obviously before you get to the basement. But officers are adamant that we want to take to you complying AO developments with residential and visitor car parking spaces. As Mr. Brown said, it will require amended plans. Amended plans need to come in, so we're actually not we're not recommending the stamping of the plans today. They need to come in with an amended plans, and the devil will be in the detail there as to how they actually make it work.
I'd be interested to see those. Chair, just another question, also picking up on the conversation to date in relation to the waste collection. Do you know what the medium density building immediately to the north, how they collect their waste? Is that off the Gold Coast Highway in a similar way proposed here? I think it's the Munro building.
Yes, through the chair. The Munro building accesses both Jefferson Lane and Gold Coast Highway, and I believe that their bin servicing is from Jefferson Lane as opposed to the highway.
Chair, just one final query in relation to those two matters: the insufficient visitor car parking at grade and having to manage that, and then the lack of space for the manoeuvrability of a waste truck. Does that speak to the fact that this site may have insufficient land available for a project of this scale? Aren't those indicators of potentially too much?
Through the chair, we had a code accessible approval for a 29 metre high, 9-storey building that also couldn't get a waste bin on site.
Different council.
So the same provisions apply. We haven't changed that provision.
Same council, different council.
So no. So whilst it doesn't indicate those two things, it doesn't indicate that maybe this isn't a size of block that's suitable for this scale. Take that, yeah. So.
I had Councillor Gates first and Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question about the car park. Why is it necessary for the car park to be part of the application? I heard you say there's a pipe to be installed. Why is it necessary to go through the car park? And who would give the approval for the car park to form part of the application, please?
Through the chair, that infrastructure is required for stormwater discharge from the proposal. So their legal point of discharge is to Jefferson Lane. So there will be a stormwater pipe that will go underneath the car park that will discharge to Jefferson Lane, and that's the reason why they've got to include that car park.
Why can't it discharge to the highway? Is it just their design? Or, I mean, I presume the building that's there now doesn't go under the car park?
City property would have provided the consent that you were requesting. Who would have provided it?
Okay. I raise that because I want to be sure that council officers consult with councillors on those issues when approval for access to roads, or it's nothing to do with you guys, but it's something that I needed to know so that I can progress that query.
I mean, it would make sense. Jefferson Lane sits lower than Gold Coast Highway, so that would be the logical place the stormwater pipe probably sits for that section. But it'd be, they would have had to require owner's consent if there's an existing pipe going through because it's associated infrastructure.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just on density, I just wanted, through you to the officers, if you could explain the density zoning. This, I read in the report that is one dwelling per 400, but there's some sort of anomaly, and I wonder if that's linked to the site size and the proximity to car park, if you could elaborate on that.
Through the chair, as you can see there, that whole area apart from the centre zone and the open space is in the medium density residential zone. Commonly, just about everything on the eastern side of the Gold Coast Highway has an RD6 residential density designation, which is 1 bedroom per 33. This site doesn't have one, which is a bit odd. So when you don't have a density designation, it reverts to 1 dwelling per 400. As we detailed in the report, I'm not sure of the page number, but we think that's probably a mapping anomaly. All the other sites around it have that 1 per 33, or some of them even have an RD7 1 per 25 square metre density designation.
Just to follow on that, understand that, could it be that this is the anomaly because of such a small site size?
It could be a lot of things, Councillor Martin. We'll try and do some further investigation with the City Planning Unit to see if we can get any clarity around that mapping anomaly before full council.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Doran's statement saying, you know, whether this should be built with the extra height. Is the extra car park, the third level car park, is that the reason they need a third car park, because of the extra height and the extra units?
Through the chair, they did introduce a third level of basement as part of increasing the number of units from 10 to 11, as what they did through the application process. I believe when they first had the application in for 10 units, the current other change only had 2 levels of basement, but they changed it to 3 when they accommodated an additional unit.
And would they have needed the pipe to go through the car park with the original?
Through the chair, I think they always needed the pipe to go through the car park.
Okay, I think it's going to be very difficult to construct, knowing the site. And I take your point, Councillor Doran.
Questions before we move on? Councillor Martin, are you questioned out?
I'll throw one more. Well, just in relation to that car park down below the visitor car park, which I thank the officers for including that recommendation. I think this committee would have requested that, but thank you. I know the car park is that sort of corkscrew. It's one way, so there's some signalised interchanges and there's priority given to coming off the Gold Coast Highway. In determining the extra visitor car park in the basement, do officers see that there needs to be some sort of turning circle provision? Because I imagine by the time you get down, if it's taken up, coming up and down this thing being one way would be challenging. So just if there's going to be a recommendation or condition that it's a visitor car park and underneath, can we make sure that there's the ability to easily go up and down?
Through the chair, we can certainly investigate that outcome. As it stands at the moment, we envisage that a visitor may just pull over into that hold point that currently exists on the ground floor if the visitor spaces were full, which might allow someone to come up the basement ramp and then they would go down. So that wouldn't impede flow, but I understand what you're saying, an ability to turn around in the basement should the visitor space be full.
Sorry, you have to help me there. So you wouldn't know it's full till you got down the basement. I think that was Councillor Martin's point. So can you just explain that again? Sorry, I missed that.
So we'll have to investigate whether there is an area for them to turn around in there.
Yeah.
I suspect on the basement plan they're fairly much the same. There would be ample manoeuvrable space in there if all car parks were full to demonstrate that a vehicle could turn around and go back up.
Safely.
Okay. So if there's no more questions, we have an officer recommendation for approval with conditions in front of us. Councillor Martin, what a move.
Chair, I would like to suggest that that the approval or the recommendation for approval, though, that we change the setbacks, because my concern is this has gone from the code to the impact approval application, that the setbacks make this, and the site cover, or especially the setbacks, make this unworkable. So I would be only supportive of this if the setbacks, especially to the east, are no worsening of the code approval. So just wanted to put that to the committee.
And so do you have a recommendation that reflects that?
The recommendation would be that there is no worsening of the setbacks from the existing approval. So I could go through that but there's probably 3 or 4 different levels. If we're talking the north, it's 4 metres down to 3.6, but on the east, it's 5.8 to down to 2.8. So I think I could catch it all by just saying there's no. If we are going to be granting the 50% uplift to its maximum, that there should be no worsening of those setbacks.
So we might have a problem in worsening. Like we'd probably have to be a bit more definitive of, setbacks must reflect the approved setbacks under the code approval, because worsening probably doesn't have a definition that applies. Councillor Patterson, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question on that through you, Chair. would this application be viable if that's put on? Is it possible they could do it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've only assessed the application on the material that we've got. We can't comment on the viability of it.
Right, so Councillor Martin has proposed to change recommendation. The problem is we don't have words that probably make that work at this stage, because it would require us to adjust conditions and probably a much broader amended plans condition. So Councillor Martin, I appreciate your intent, but do you have any words prepared?
No, I don't, Chair, because, look, I'm trying to, the design of the building, I acknowledge, has gotten a lot better, but I think they are doing, there's constraints here, or they're pushing the envelope too far. So, look, I was attempting to try and get it to a space that the community and the neighbouring properties would support, but I don't think I can get there in the words that would stack up. So I think I'll take that back and just move for a refusal based on, I don't think it meets community expectations.
I think unless you have other words prepared and can pull out the conditions that would have to be adjusted, that's probably best for now. Because that's going to be a significant piece of work, and I don't think we're going to be able to prep that on the floor again today. So if that's your intent, then I'm happy to accept that as a change recommendation to go for a refusal of the application.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second.
Right, so we'll just let our minute secretary catch up. Right, and then Councillor Patterson has indicated she will second that. Thank you, Councillor Young, and I will second the foreshadowed when we get to it. So can we foreshadow the officer recommendation by Councillor Young?
Yeah.
And so, councillors, we are required under the new court directions to give reasons. We can't just do a blanket refusal. We need to have some reasons in there. So, Councillor Martin, have you got some reasons you want to add in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to, for the following reasons, that it does not satisfy density objective, does not satisfy the criteria for density, site cover, setbacks, and also noting waste management issues, and also the parking constraints, which are the inability to provide an accepted outcome on visitor car parkings at grade, at level, and additionally the loss of car parking on the Gold Coast Highway.
Okay. Councillor Hamill, may I ask, I do not want to prolong this meeting any longer, I can assure you, but I'm wondering whether it would be worth taking a few minutes just to make sure that we've got wording clear offline.
So, Councillor Patterson, it's the responsibility of a councillor to bring words on this stuff. So I'm happy to give a little bit of leeway here if we're trying to get something together on the floor. Yeah, otherwise, that would be the alternate option, is that with the change recommendation withdrawn and Councillor Martin takes the time to be ready for full council for it with wording ready. But he's putting it forward now, so unless he wants to withdraw it. Or you test it today and you've always got full council for another scrap at it.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I suppose I came into this open and persuadable, and it was on the basis of discussion that I got to this position. So I'm satisfied that those are accurate reflections of the issues we have with the site, but I will be providing more specific, reliable, legally defendable positions on those elements ahead of council. And I'd like to work with city officers on that.
I've got a question on this. So if you remember the Cotley Street application that we refused, and at the time I did get wording and support from officers, is there an ability through the chair, for us to get legal advice on wording prior to council? Because that wording it's so critical. Once we present that in a case and it's an illegal argument, it makes sense, rather than us doing what we think we can do, getting actual legal advice, independent, prior, on how we would best word that.
Through the chair, it is a hard question for me to answer. I'm not a lawyer, but often what lawyers do is ask for sort of evidence so that they can give legal advice. So to get a legal opinion, they would have to be provided with some sort of evidence or reasoning or some other material to be able to provide a legal opinion. But it's probably one that we would have to take on notice and ask the General Counsel if that's what you meant, Councillor Patterson. Or
so, and this may be a question to you, Chair. So, I suppose the interest you mentioned, I think you just mentioned, will this wording stack up, right? So the intent may be there, and it may just be about language. I don't want us to be missing things on any recommendation because we're not getting correct language.
The example you gave, I'm going to spend 60 seconds as quickly. So the Cotley example you gave was before we had the new directive from the planning court around provisions of refusals from councils. So for exactly the circumstance, the court issued very clear directive saying, just no more blanket refusals, must be detailed out. Then has created a conflict point of you've got officers who wrote the report then being asked to prepare wording to go against it, which the judges have said, well, hold up, I'm not going to accept that either. It might be a good one to test. So it may not be that it's mixed team that necessarily gives advice on this. It may have to be for an ability for a council to approach a legal section and get wording, even just get it formatted correctly and check that the wording would be deemed legal by it. So not going to mixed team for advice on it. But before now and full council, we can get that teased out a little bit more because we don't want to be putting up useless wording, but we also have to respect the court's directive and respect mixed team's position that they can't be writing the report for approval and be expected to provide wording to refuse it. That's the court has just said no more of that. So, Councillor Martin, where are we up to?
I'd like to add just a 3 to this, which might, and I appreciate everyone's patience on this. It should be quick, and I'll tie this to the city plan. That noting the above, the application does not satisfy I believe it's specific outcome 3.3.2.1 brackets 9C, which is a well-managed interface with and relationship to impact on nearby development, including the reasonable amenity expectations of nearby residents. Yep.
Councillor Gates, you may ask a question.
I just wondered, in this report, is there anywhere that lists all the criteria necessary to get the uplift? Which page is it on? I thought I saw it, but I can't find it. (644). Thank you. No. No, I just want those things.
Page 620, Councillor Gates. It starts. Page 620.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thought I saw it. No.
Okay. Right, so just for so we'll just run through. So, Councillor Martin, you're happy with your change recommendation now?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. And Councillor Patterson, just for the record, confirming you're happy to still support the updated change recommendation?
I am, but I am concerned about this matter. As you said, the directive that we provide specific information in this, which this is what's going to be relied on in court, and that now we can't rely on our officers to give us that because the court won't accept officers making one recommendation and then our recommendation being given by them. So we do really need good legal advice on this, and every time that we do a change recommendation prior to planning, and I look forward to that. But on the base of it, I think Councillor Martin's done a very good job.
So I think Councillor Martin has demonstrated with point 3, it's actually not that difficult. Like it's just pulling it out and going to the specific condition. So it'll probably be something we all have to learn a little as we go. But yes, we will have that discussion about how, as a committee in a council chamber, the new court directive impacts us. Because I very much respect Mick and Mick's team's position, and I know how we've done it in the past. But we really have to find a different way now, and probably getting better at talking to each other. Some of us are better than others at wordsmithing these things together. So having those conversations beforehand, because while we can be open and persuadable, there's nothing wrong with having words ready.
I do think it's more than that. It really, if we're going to rely on this in a court case, no matter how capable and the work that we do, the other side is going to have great lawyers preparing their work. We're kind of doing it makes sense that this council, this committee and council, if they're providing a change recommendation, have independent legal advice on it. Before we do it, because of that directive, because they're saying now the judge is going to be looking at this.
So
have we got that right or not?
A judge will look at the resolution of council, not the resolution of committee necessarily. So it's the gap. It's the gap in between that. If we do this today, what's now the process for someone to check the wording and say, yep, meets the court's expectations, or to someone to say, hey, you need to restructure that sentence. We're in furious agreement, which is why we'll get to Councillor Martin moving his change recommendation. Floor is yours.
Yeah, exactly. This is rubbish.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm moving this recommendation today, and I do note the officers work in working with the applicant to try and get it to a point that's acceptable. But I think it is a site that's doing too much, and I think to grant the maximum uplift permissible in the area, we've got to meet all of the 8-part test, which we've talked about a lot. And I think given the setbacks are significantly decreased to most areas, and notably to a council-owned car park. And I know that we can't lodge development objections here because the city is that landowner, but that also comes with it the community expectations that we can maximise the potential of that car park that adjoins this property. And that might be additional car parking levels. And I think that it would see a detrimental outcome to both the car park and also the residents. I think it will be a bad outcome for both to be that close. I mean, we're talking about 2 metres. This is a small site. It's 488 square metres, 488, seeking 14 levels. I note throughout the report the high rises to the western side of the Gold Coast highway, but they are in the centre CBD zone, which has a 39 metre code approval. So in my mind, this is in the medium density, which has the 29 metre code, and to the east, it would be the highest building of any of the character areas. The highest building, and it is the smallest site. I can't reconcile the car parking arrangements. I note that the Gold Coast Highway and the code approval had the servicing of the bins, but I think when we move to an impact space and we are seeking full uplift, then we need to demand better and something that doesn't impose additional issues on the community. So I know there was talk of we could have a loading zone, but essentially right now, to have 9 bins out the front, we are removing car parks from a community where there's retail and there's shops. And I mean, this site doesn't have a medium rigid vehicle for moving. I mean, they can't even park out the front. So I think it would impose too many issues on the community for this site. I think it is a small site. I think it was well placed at the code level, and I possibly could support an uplift, and I attempted to with the setbacks coming in. But I think they've pushed it to the extreme where, the visitor car parks are unworkable, and for all the reasons I've talked about, density, site cover, and the wedding cake effect in that we've got quite a lot sitting outside the acceptable site cover. So 40% at the upper level, we're at 52, which is 30% higher than we would be seeking. So thank you, Chair. I'd like to see this refused because I think simply it's just a common sense 488 square metres. I just don't think it fits given everything we've talked about today.
Speaker against the change recommendation. I'm happy to take a question.
Thanks, Jim. So through you to Councillor Martin, what is the agreeable or approvable setback that is not met, please?
Well, I think if you look to the east where it interfaces, so page 589, on page 589 we've got a table of the setback assessment, where we've got the typical, so above level 1, we've gone from a code approval of 5.8 metres to the wall to 2 metres. I'll let you get to page 589.
I can see those changes. I'm interested to know what's the difference between what's being sought and what the town plan provides for.
It is that wedding cake effect. So I think at the top level, I would have to go to my city officer's report, but because it is a staggering of meterage, because it talks about exceeding 7.5 metres, it's a 5 metres added for every 3 metres of height. So this is why I was saying this wedding cake view is important. I don't know whether officers want to expand on how much it exceeds at the upper level.
They've answered that they don't have that detail at this time.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Young, do you have any other questions, or I'm happy to move to someone speaking against?
Thanks.
So, I'll speak against Councillor Martin's proposed change recommendation. It is a small site, but it's about the context of the site. So, it's not a small, skinny, long site. It's small, but it's square. It's got a 20-metre frontage on it, which is the standard frontage of a lot of blocks in this area. If this was a long, skinny block where we were looking at 40 metres of a building face that was only 2 metres off the boundary, I'd definitely be against it. But while it's a small block, it's still the right size floor plate for it. And I looked at the impacts. So you've got the existing Munro building next to it. Under the code approval, the setbacks are worse in my opinion. So the most important setbacks in a lot of this is the setbacks at ground level, which we've picked up 2 metres under the impact assessable one. And Councillor Martin is correct. So the setbacks as you go higher up have changed, but they've changed by 400 mil. In the end, we've ended up with roughly 7 metres between the two buildings in most areas. If this site was twice as big and we're looking at a building twice this size, 7 metres would well and truly be where we'd expect it to be. So the fact it's a small site doesn't worry me. It's about the impact to the surrounding developments, and the setbacks to the existing building I think are still more than acceptable. The addition of the 1.8 metre privacy screens that are not part of the code approval, because we need to respect the fact that if we knock this one back, they still have the code approval, which they could go ahead and start construction on tomorrow. Doesn't have the 1.8 metre privacy screens, doesn't provide what is a very real concern in the submissions. The car parking situation, do I personally think that they will be able to make 3 basements ever constructable? I don't, but that's not what we're here to decide. That's for them to work out in detailed design later on. If they can't get it to work, then they're going to have to come back and cut the building down. So I'll accept on the 2D paper that they can make the parking work, but I'll be really interested when they go to a builder about how they can actually make that be constructed. For me, the other big change here is what the building looks like. So unlike most of the other applications we receive where they have a code approval and then add height, normally they're just taking the existing floor plate from the code approved and adding a couple more levels on. These guys have completely redesigned the building, probably respecting the fact that while the code got through and approved, it's not the greatest outcome in the world, whereas I'm much more supportive of the built form that is put forward under the impact assessment, and think that the interface to the Munro is definitely a lot better, and the interface to the Gold Coast Highway is better because we've got a better setback from the front. So while I very much respect Councillor Martin's change recommendation, and I'm really pleased to see progress in that space and we're putting this forward, I will be backing the officer position today that this should be approved. The Speaker for the motion? Councillor Patterson?
I will be supporting Councillor Martin's recommendation for all the reasons that have been provided already. I would just like to make one note on the change to the appearance of it that you mentioned. Again, of course, I'm going to speak about landscaping, and the pretty picture there I don't think is actually viable. Having those plants there on a southwest corner, it's not going to look like that. So it looks pretty in the picture, but realistically you'd have to be a pretty impressive gardener to actually have that look like that on a southwest corner. But that's not the reason. It's for all the reasons presented here today, and I support Councillor Martin. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, you wish to close?
Just before we do,
Councillor Gates.
are those gardens conditioned that go for the full height of the building on those?
I'm happy to accept that very, very late question in debate.
Sorry, they are conditioned. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Martin, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Chair. Good discussion, and I don't have much pleasure in seeking this refusal because I think I absolutely acknowledge that the design improvement is far better, and I do acknowledge some of the aesthetic changes. But notwithstanding that, also I think maybe the market has moved a lot since that original application was put in. I think that the community, the buyers market dictates some of this design, given what the other products that is emerging. So it is just that this application pushes the envelope too far, and it's, in my opinion, doesn't meet that reasonable interface. There's probably somewhere in the middle, and I don't think it's as simple as this is rejected, they're building the code approval, because I think there's some merit in uplift, but not to the level where the community has to pick up the tabs. And that, I talked about parking, but I think the main area that I couldn't get past is that we represent the community on the community asset, which is the car park, and we know that will go up. And I just think we are, it might not be the buyers of this unit right now. They might be okay with the close proximity, but at some point that's going to change hands, and I think it limits our ability to go up. And even if we set aside that and say, no, we approved that, you wanted to go closer, I know we're going to have issues down the track. And I think that we have to represent the community there and reserve the development potential of our car park, because I know that Surf Club is at capacity. Parking is a constant issue. I won't go into the light rail debate, but we know that either way there's going to be buses down the Gold Coast Highway. So I think the issues around parking along the Gold Coast Highway, especially in this CBD zone, is at a premium. So for those reasons, I just cannot support the maximum uplift, given we're so far outside the realms of what we would be seeking for the site. And 488 square metres at 14 stories, I think that kind of says it all.
Vote is closed. We'll take the vote. Since it's a refusal motion, division is called. All those in favour of the change recommendation: Councillor Fowler, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin, Councillor O'Neill. Against: Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Gates, Councillor Doran. That's a four-way tie. And for new councillors, this is the first time you've seen this, so it is normally the position that when we have a tie, the chair goes with the officer recommendation. So I have the casting vote, so I will cast against. So the change recommendation is lost, and we'll go to the foreshadowed recommendation. Councillor Young, did you wish to speak to the foreshadowed?
Just briefly, in times past, I've certainly been very critical of these development applications where they seek the maximum uplift, and the evaluation of them is a very subjective opinion as far as I'm concerned, and it's always been quite questionable. In this case, I believe that the application is meritorious and that it deserves our support. I think the officers have been very conscientious in their evaluation of it, and they are ultimately cognizant of the legal situation in this part of the world and all the contests that there have been, and I think that they have applied that cognizance in their evaluation and their recommendations to us. I would love to have supported Councillor Marshall on his proposal to refuse, but I think it was so poorly presented at this point in time that it just would not get through the door of a court. It would be just fail before that point in time and at the cost of ratepayers.
Councillor Doran, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping to get in before Councillor Young spoke. I was wondering if Councillor Young would consider adding a condition to acknowledge the city officer's desire to add a fourth visitor car park in the recommendation. They've talked about it through the day, and I was wondering if we could add that.
I think it's already in there, isn't it? So that's already been added into the conditions.
Oh, not in the recommendation. They've added into the conditions.
It's been added into the conditions. Councillor Gates, did you have a question?
I was going to get the record corrected, but they've just corrected it.
They've corrected it?
Thank you.
Right. And Councillor Martin, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question on the conditions. Page 689, if we're going, this motion has a condition around the off-street parking, and I note that 689 has the the old parking layout, which has changed, but it seems to have dropped off the numbers. So condition 14 currently reads as a total of 17 car parks, but it should be changed to read the current amount and that visitor car parks. So I think that needs to be called out, so it is conditioned.
Yeah. Officers, can we tidy that up between our full council?
Through the chair, council's previous position was that we would list the car parking numbers provided. That's why the original condition as currently set reads 17. In recent times, we've shifted to not condition the number of car parking spaces within that condition for the car parking, but they are referenced in the approved plans condition that has that detail. It's been our consistent approach for the year.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, Councillor Martin, they can explain the history on that a little bit more offline. There's some reasons around why we do it that way. So we're going to pull us back to debate because I've allowed Councillor Young to open, so it's fair now. Someone wishing to speak against the foreshadowed motion? Councillor Young, do you wish to close?
I think I might have referred to you as Councillor Marshall. That was a mistake. I'm sorry. It was a combination of Josh and Martin and became Marsh.
Okay. So the foreshadowed motion is live. We are closing debate and we'll take the vote. And for the record, I will call division against. All those in favour of the foreshadowed motion? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Young, Councillor Gates, Councillor Doran against. Councillor Fowler, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin, Councillor O'Neill. It is a four-way tie. Those chair of casting vote, and we'll go with the officer recommendation, which means the foreshadowed motion is carried. Good luck to anyone watching this video back to make sense of what's going on.
Chairman, can the minute secretary, I don't know that they've had this situation before, but they need to indicate how I voted, that I voted in support of the motion because of, or was this the one? This wasn't?
I thought because that called division, I thought that recorded your vote and it does that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Does it need to indicate the casting vote was the deciding vote?
So normally in my memory it would say casting vote was used. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I could have gone either way on that one. Have another crack at council, Josh.
Okay, so that is item 6.6 dealt with. That takes us to item 6.7. Officers, good morning. We'll go to the presentation.
Good afternoon, councillors. Item 6.7 is for an application for a development permit for a material change of use establishing 61 multiple dwellings at 55 Eden Avenue in Coolangatta. The site consists of a single allotment with a site area of 7,071 square metres and frontages to Marine Parade, Hill Street and Eden Avenue. The site currently contains Greenmount Beach House, which is a large resort building constructed in the late 1970s. In 2022, the site gained approval for a 1 into 3 lot subdivision, which is yet to be enacted. However, the applicant has proposed the development within future lots 10 and 20, and as such, officers have based their assessment on these lot sizes and the future lot boundaries.
Councillor Gates.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but it just occurred to me that although this isn't an application by Sunland, it's a new company created by
That's fine.
Sabre, is it?
Air it out.
I did accept donations from Sunland historically. I don't have that information. Nothing since, I think, 2014. But I wanted just to ask the committee if they would feel that I should declare, because if so, I'll have to go and get the documentation.
Yeah, so does this make sense to councillors? What's here? So you know, Sunland provide the donation, but this isn't Sunland, but it's a former director of Sunland. It's outside the relevant term as well.
Yes, well, that's
yeah. So could I? So it's on the public record to committee members. Like, does committee feel like Councillor Gates needs to put a formal DCOI in, or we have to accept that she's aired it and that we've said there's no need for a conflict? Of course, Councillor Young.
So Aravim is the current applicant and owner, presumably, and is that a derivation of Sunland? Is it the same?
not a derivation. It's a new
directors?
company, as I understand it, established by maybe Sahel's son. I'm not absolutely sure.
Councillor, so Sunland still exists as a legal entity and still trades as a legal entity. This is
Right.
a new company established by Saba. So it's not Sahel, it's Sahaba.
Thanks, that's clear enough for me.
Yeah, like, so council committee and Councillor Gates aired this at the pre-brief, and forgive me for
I
not
forgot
pulling up
too.
beforehand. Like, is everyone comfortable that this is enough degrees of separation away that there's no need for a DCOI? It's on the public record, so Councillor Gates has got a position to defend there. Councillor Fowler?
Yeah, I'd like to move it. I'm happy to support that, being it's a separate entity, it's outside of the
So
relevant term.
don't even need a mover. Like,
Okay.
I don't think it warrants an actual conflict.
May I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So this fellow wasn't a director of Sunland?
Yeah.
If he was a director of Sunland, it might be different.
Yeah, but how is Councillor Gates to know that based on what's in
Okay.
the report?
Yeah, no, I'm okay.
Like, it's getting a lot of degrees away from it. You know, Councillor Gates can make inquiries before full council, and if she chooses to, could look at it then. But even then, it's outside the relevant term, and we've taken a fairly strong position on that. Councillor O'Neill.
I am just going by a bulletin report. I don't know for sure, but when the company bought the Greenmount site, it was stated in the bulletin that both father and son were directors of the company. So I don't, as I say, I don't know for sure. That was in the bulletin. So
If
but I
you'll
don't
excuse me, I'll just go and get the details and I'll make the declaration. I mean,
Right. So, adjournment for 5 minutes, please. To allow Councillor Gates to get a book. Meeting recommenced at 13:02. Councillor Gates has chosen to put in a declarable conflict of interest. Councillor Gates, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I received donations from Sunland in 2014 and 2015, well outside the relevant term, but I understand from other representatives that the Obedience are both involved in this application, and on that basis I declare my prior receipt of donation. But I've had no conversation with anyone about the application, not the applicant, no consultants, and I would like to remain in the room if possible.
Any questions for Councillor Gates? So just before we go to the procedural motion, which I'm guessing that what Councillor Patterson was getting to, I think we should just add in the point of it's outside the relevant term, just to remain consistent. And should that be is minor and of a remote nature? Is minor and of a remote nature?
It's double outside now.
Councillor Patterson, you happy to move that procedural motion still?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You...
Oh, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yep, so Councillor Patterson move, Councillor Hamill second. Division is called on the procedural motion. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Martin, Councillor Doran, Councillor O'Neill. And just for the meetings, acknowledgement, Councillor Young has had to leave to get to another meeting today. So Councillor Young has left us for the day. Okay, so that's the procedural motion dealt with, and we will now go back to the officer recommendation.
Yeah, it did have to say I didn't vote.
Thanks, Chair. The site's located within the high-density residential zone area of Coolangatta, known as Rainbow Bay. To the west of the site is the Coolangatta Major Centre, which is shown in blue on this slide. And the site is surrounded. The site and the surrounding area is identified as a code-accessible building height of 38 metres, which is identified as high-rise within the city plan. The applicant has proposed to establish 61 multiple dwellings with a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom units within 2 14-storey towers and 2 basement levels located below. Officers note that there is a significant grade difference across the site with the Marine Parade, which is seen in these sections. So on those sections, Marine Parade is on the right-hand side and then Eden Avenue is on the left-hand side. 2 basement levels are proposed that contain 145 resident and 10 visitor parking spaces, achieving compliance with the parking rates prescribed within the Transport Code. Vehicle access to basement 1 is provided through the existing access easement within the site. The ground floor area includes a range of communal areas, which include pools, a spa, kids' play areas, a gym, and some various outdoor areas. A varied floor plate has been provided for each tower, with the lower levels containing 3 units per floor, the middle levels containing 2 units per floor, and level 12 of each tower containing a single penthouse unit with an extensive private open space area on the rooftop above. The development has triggered impact assessment due to exceeding the code accessible building height of 38 metres with a maximum height of 48.2 metres and an uplift of 26.8% above the 38-metre building height overlay. This results in the application requiring assessment against the uplift provisions of the specific outcome 3.3.2.19 of the strategic framework. And I'll just note 2 of those provisions within my presentation, which are provisions B and G. So with regard to provision B, which is the local identity and sense of place, officers gave consideration to the established building height character within Rainbow Bay and prepared this character analysis that shows the approved and established building heights within the local area, with the existing buildings shown in orange and the approved shown as green. And this also shows the RL of each building to demonstrate that the perceived height, this is due to the varying topography across Rainbow Bay. This assessment determined that the proposed towers would sit comfortably within the established high-rise building height character and is of a comparable height to a number of these towers. Officer's next consideration was against point G, which was the elements of scenic amenity and, importantly, local popular public outlooks. Given the prominent location of the site, the consideration was given to the development's impact on scenic amenity and particularly its impact on the adjacent Green Mountain headland. The applicant provided a number of photo montages taken from the surrounding popular public outlooks looking to the subject site. These figures on screen show a wider view with a more focused view underneath, and then in red it shows the outline of a 38-metre building height overlay. Officers' review of these photo montages firstly determined that the development would not block views to the headland from the surrounding outlooks. Furthermore, while the development will be visible from these outlooks, the city plan intends for high-rise development in a high-density residential form on the subject site, with the intended height demonstrated in red within these figures. While additional height is proposed, these levels have been recessed to reduce any perceived dominance and have been provided with a landscape frame to complement the natural features of the headland. The applicant undertook public notification where 18 properly made submissions were received. Where applicable, officers have taken these concerns into consideration, with a detailed response to each being provided within the officer's report. Following the assessment of the application, officers considered that the proposal achieves compliance with the city plan and as such is recommended to be approved subject to conditions.
Questions for officers? Councillor O'Neill.
Just a couple of questions. Nathan, can we just confirm that there will be a vibration management plan conditioned for this site?
Through the chair to Councillor Councillor O'Neill. That's correct. There is a vibration management plan conditioned, which is in accordance with our standard vibration management plan condition.
And the other question is, I think from memory you may have mentioned there was an arborist report on the Norfolk pines that sit on top of the hill adjacent this site, and their growth over the next 5 to 10 years, and that was submitted by the applicant. Can you comment on that at all?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct. They provided that extensive arborist report, which it also surveyed the current heights of those Norfolk pines, and then it did project some growth to it. But I think one of the key things that officers looked at as part of this assessment was the existing heights of that. And it was showed that the highest point of the building would be below the highest point of those Norfolk Island pines existing.
Thank you. I'm happy to move it when you're ready.
If I could quickly, so just because you got these photo montages up about from the visual amenities side of things, would officers confirm that we had an independent peer review of this work done?
To the chair, that's correct. So the applicant provided these photo montages, but they'd also provided a visual impact assessment done by a suitably qualified professional. We got those and these photo montages peer reviewed by our own professional, which essentially agreed with the recommendations of those. And I've put some of those comments in the officer's report as well.
Councillor Martin, question.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on the glass balustrading. Obviously, there's a lot of glass, but I know it's curved. Is that I'm just wondering about reflection, being this on the outlier and getting that reflective light to the north. Will those curves mitigate that? Is that the purpose, or has there been some sort of reflective test done?
Through the chair to the councillor, it wasn't specifically done to mitigate any reflections, but it was something that officers considered as part of our assessment. So to address it, we recommended a condition of approval requiring that a study is proposed prior to any building works commencing. Given it is a little bit unique, officers don't generally condition that kind of thing for a building of this size, but given its prominent location and the kind of unique design of those balconies, we thought it was necessary in this situation.
Other questions? Councillor O'Neill, happy to move?
Happy to move it, thanks, Chair.
Seconder. Councillor Gates. Councillor O'Neill, wish to open?
Thanks, Chair. There's no denying that this is a very important site for Southern Gold Coast, and it's actually the third set of plans that the applicant had put forward to the assessing planners. The first two, I think they read the room in that they did speak to me, they did listen to the community, and went back and decided on a softer building. The curved glass is what they've come up with. Now, it may not be to everyone's taste, but it is their land, and I think that the site cover's fantastic. Their setbacks are fantastic. They could have actually applied for the full 50% uplift, but they've only applied for a 23% uplift. They've been very cognizant of the Norfolk pine on the adjacent headland, which was really important for me, and I think important for the community as well. They've got more than compliant parking, and just to let everyone know, there was a subdivision. There's 2 other lots on this site. They have informed me over the last couple of days that they have lodged for 2 code accessible buildings for those 2 lots. So I think this particular applicant is going to be very sympathetic to that site. I probably would have liked to have seen some short-term accommodation on this site, because it has been a short-term accommodation offering for a long period of time, and maybe we might see that in the next applications. But I think it's definitely not what I'd call affordable housing, but it'll certainly upmarket housing. And look, the landscaping plan that they've presented is absolutely outstanding, and I think again will be sympathetic to the site and sympathetic to the other 2 lots as well. So I really can't fault it. As I said, the design of the building may not be to everyone's taste, and someone may decide that something else should have gone there. But quite honestly, I think over time people will accept this. Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor O'Neill, do you wish to close it all? Yeah. So I think Councillor O'Neill's put it on the record, but I've very much got an understanding of this application. It's been a really intensive negotiation between officers and the applicant. There has been a lot of backwards and forwards. Councillor O'Neill pointed out the 3 different variations of the scheme. Like, there's been a lot of money spent just to get this point. So that's a really positive reflection on officers that we made it very clear where our expectations were, especially around height and compared to Norfolk pines and what things had to look like, and we've got there. Councillor O'Neill called out the landscaping, and I actually think that's a really important part, because this is a unique site when you drive up and around and how the building sits in it. And with poor landscaping, it may not have been a great interface with the road. Officers put a lot of emphasis on that to make sure that when you drive and walk around that road and around this building, that it should really sit and be quite special on that corner. Councillor Gates. No, I think. Oh, shoot me. You know, I can definitely say no. Quickly.
Thank you. Just
Quickly.
very quickly, is the power to this site underground? Is there a condition? I just noticed there was a really ugly photograph of the power lines next door, and I just wondered if it is underground to this site. It's not. So they're going to be ugly power lines.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't specifically conditioned that. So I think the devil's going to be in the detail a bit later on. It's not a council requirement.
Yep. And also not one, we've tested this before, we can't make that requirement either.
Okay. It's just the photographs don't show the power lines.
Yep. All right. Debate is closed. We'll take the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Now everyone's getting understanding why you're not meant to take questions during debate. Okay. Officers, thank you. That takes us to the last item, 6.8, the Adam Morris special. We're going to be done before 1:30.
Excuse me, Chair, do we need a report for this one? Do we need a presentation?
So,
I mean, could we just see if there's questions?
So I think there was This is a bit of a unique one, and there was an intent for bringing it to committee, so we'd probably not be doing justice if we just skip the presentation completely, but a 5-minute presentation followed by a couple of questions will get us there, and we'll be done by 1:30.
Right. Through the chair, good afternoon, councillors. My name is Chelsea, and item 6.8 is an application for a material change of use for low impact industry at 946 Tamborine Oxenford Road, Wongawallan. Officers are recommending refusal. The subject site is an irregular shaped lot and is currently improved by a single dwelling house gaining access off Tamborine Oxenford Road and a shed which is accessed exclusively from Clearwater Court. The proposed development is located within this existing shed and gains access from Clearwater Court and the 200-metre access handle only. It's noted that the subject site is encumbered by an existing environmental covenant. The site and surrounding Clearwater Court is mapped within the rural zone. The site is mapped within a non-urban area outside of the urban footprint and is located over 7 kilometres from the closest industrial catchment. The subject site is located within Clearwater Court cul-de-sac, which consists of large dwellings and associated outbuildings with very low intensity development. The area has large open spaces and vegetation and is not utilised for rural production activities. As such, whilst the lots within Clearwater Court are mapped in the rural zone, the immediate area is more akin to the high amenity areas expected within a rural residential area, leading to a unique rural character. The applicant has lodged an application in response to the issue of a show cause notice for low impact industry involving assembling or fabricating products of metal producing less than 10 tonnes per year. This does not include metal finishing. The development is proposed within the existing 216 square metre shed on the site and is a steel manufacturing business which services the commercial and food and beverage industries. Materials are delivered to the premises as needed and often come from different suppliers at the start of projects. Once assembled or fabricated, the products are loaded onto various size vehicles and transported to various locations to be installed on site. The use is heavily client dependent and, as stated by the owner, the nature of the business means the operators cannot control the deliveries for the business. The applicant states that no more than 6 non-resident employees will be on site at any one time and 2 resident employees form part of the business as well. Following the lodgement of the application, officers attended the premises and performed a site visit where the photos on screen were taken. The application was based on the photos and the common material. There are 2 key issues covered throughout the officer's report. The first is industrial development in the rural zone, which is not envisaged. As stated previously, Clearwater Court is uniquely characterised by single dwellings and associated outbuildings on large lots with open areas. The introduction of an industrial operation in any capacity is not considered appropriate in this instance and is not in keeping with the reasonable amenity expectations, nor is it consistent with the community expectations. The operational scale and operational intensity is not appropriate and is considered to generate adverse noise and traffic impacts, conflicting with the existing health and amenity of the area. It is noted that the use can occur elsewhere in the city, with the closest industrial catchment only 7 kilometres from the subject site. The second key issue is industrial traffic and safety impacts on the surrounding area and road network. The proposed development is exclusively reliant on vehicle access through Clearwater Court. Due to the size of the existing development footprint, heavy vehicles are unable to exit and enter in forward gear. As such, these vehicles are required to reverse approximately 380 metres along the access handle and within Clearwater Court to be able to exit onto Tamborine Oxenford Road. This manoeuvre is considered extremely unsafe and presents an adverse safety risk due to the lack of visibility and length of the manoeuvre. Clearwater Court is classified as a rural access street and has not been constructed for continual use by heavy vehicles. Heavy vehicle traffic and their loads present an unacceptable impact on the road pavement and will compromise the function of the road. 10 properly made submissions were received during public notification, all objecting the development, and were from adjoining residents within Clearwater Court and the immediate surrounds. The matters raised in submission included traffic impacts, general amenity and privacy concerns, and other impacts as listed on the screen. A detailed assessment against these matters has been provided within the report. Multiple submissions included photographic evidence of the existing operations of the business. The evidence provided of the unlawful use of premises highlights the scale and intensity of the industrial operation and the incompatible nature of the development with the established area. As previously stated, the owner cannot control the deliveries for the business. Following assessment, officers are recommending refusal of the application for the following reasons on screen, and officers are happy to answer any further questions.
Councillor Gates was first, and then Councillor Patterson was your shotgun second.
No questions. I simply want to move to support the officer's recommendation, and I'll explain why when the time comes.
Seconding Councillor Patterson.
I will second that, and I wanted to acknowledge the officers for the velocity, thank you very much, and the recommendation.
Councillor Gates is happy to move.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. This was highlighted through complaints to my office, several of them, and the shed was privately certified with, I guess, a point that it would be used with a nexus to rural activities, which clearly is not the case. So the officers have done a lot of work on it. The reversing of vehicles of that size out that clear water court are just totally unacceptable for the neighbouring community. So thank you to the officers. It's a thorough report, and Chelsea, you've done well. Thanks.
Speakers against. Councillor Gates wish to close. So closed, we'll take the vote. All those in favour? The refusal is carried unanimous. Officers, thank you. Councillors, that concludes today's agenda, and we'll close the meeting at 13:23.